Welcome to Wife Cheating Story. I hope you have an enjoyable and relaxing time listening. Let's get started.
I was sitting on the edge of a cot, boots caked in red dust, sweat dripping from the back of my neck. The hum of the desert wind outside the tent barely registered. That day had been like any other in deployment, routine drills, long silences, and the weight of memory pressing down like my gear. We just returned from an 8-hour patrol and I was about to crash when my sat phone pinged with a weak signal. A text came through, staggered word by word like a bad omen whispered too slow. I'm leaving you and moving on with Logan. I can't do this PTSD mess anymore. You're broken. I've already moved your things into storage. Let's not make this harder than it has to be. My thumb hovered above the screen, heart strangely calm. 13 years. 13 years of birthdays, scraped together anniversaries, late-night laughs, and whispered apologies. 13 years boiled down to a message that felt more like a bill collector's notice than a goodbye. I didn't even feel my body tense. No anger. No sharp inhale. Just a stillness I hadn't felt in months. I reread the message 4 times. Not because I didn't believe it, but because I wanted to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. Deployment plays tricks on your brain. Time, memory, emotion, they all blur. But not this. This was real. As real as the $0 balance I saw when I opened the banking app she and I once shared. I recognized the withdrawal timestamp. 5 hours ago. She waited until the check cleared before sending that text. I thought about our last conversation, distant, clipped. She asked if I wanted her to send new photos of our dog, Jasper. I told her I'd love that. She never did. My fingers moved slowly as I typed back a single word. Understood. I didn't trust myself to write more. Not because I wanted to scream or beg or argue, but because silence was my best weapon now. She expected outrage, maybe even desperation. She wouldn't get either. The woman I'd once trusted with everything had revealed herself with surgical precision. And I was a soldier trained to endure, to observe, to execute when the moment called. I sat there a while longer, letting the dust settle both around me and inside my chest. Trey walked into the tent, flopped down on the bunk across from me and groaned. You good, man? I looked at him, mask in place. Yeah, just tired. He didn't ask more. Nobody in a unit like ours pushed past the surface unless invited. That night, I lay in my cot and stared at the canvas ceiling, thinking back to the moment I first noticed Tessa change. It wasn't obvious. Nothing ever is at first. But there was a difference in the way she'd paused during our last FaceTime call, the way her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. She told me to take care of myself before signing off. And I remember thinking how cold it sounded coming from someone who used to fall asleep on my chest just listening to my heartbeat. I had known this was coming. Maybe not this exact way, not so cold and swift. But I had felt the shift. It's what we're trained to detect: pattern disruption, change in rhythm, enemy movement. I just never expected the enemy to wear my wife's perfume. But even then, I'd been preparing. 3 months ago, before this last deployment, I opened a private account under my name only. Transferred 10% of every paycheck. I'd moved copies of our legal documents, deeds, medical records, even my service contracts to a locked unit in a facility in downtown Spokane. I told her it was for military security compliance. She nodded, kissed me goodbye, and probably called Logan 10 minutes later. It didn't break me, but it did strip me down to something elemental. After lights out, I got up quietly and stepped outside the tent. The air was cooler now, the stars clearer than they ever were back home. I lit a cigarette, my one bad habit that deployment kept alive, and let the smoke sting my lungs. My hands weren't shaking. That surprised me. In the past, I might have drowned in what-ifs. Not now. There was clarity in betrayal. It sharpened things. Made priorities scream through the noise. Tessa thought this was the end of a broken man. She was wrong. This was the beginning of someone she never took the time to understand. Someone who doesn't yell or cry or crumble. Someone who watches. Learns. And plans. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of something burning in the distance. I took one last drag, dropped the cigarette into the sand, and crushed it with my boot. Then I walked back into the tent, crawled into my cot, and closed my eyes. I wasn't broken. I was becoming something far more dangerous. She used to trace the lines on my face like a map, whispering that each one told a story of strength. Back then, I believed her. Back when I came home from my second tour and found a bottle of whiskey on the counter, not because I needed it, but because she thought it might help me sleep. Back when the nightmares hadn't yet become routine. Before her eyes started scanning past me instead of into me. Tessa always said she was proud of me. The way I served. The way I kept my pain bottled, kept the chaos away from our kids, our home, her peace. But pride has an expiration date, apparently. For her, it ended when the nightmares began, when I'd wake up clawing at phantom images, drenched in sweat, gasping like the war had crawled back inside my lungs. That was when she stopped seeing me as a husband and started treating me like a burden. She called it emotional absence. Claimed I'd checked out, retreated into silence. She wasn't wrong. I had gone quiet. But not from apathy. From effort. I was trying not to break things with my grief. Trying not to bleed my nightmares onto her pillow. But in her mind, silence was weakness. And weakness wasn't sexy. Not when you had a new neighbor with abs, a half smile, and a job that didn't come with trauma. Logan, 29 years old. Fitness instructor. A man whose greatest struggle was protein intake. He moved into the building across the street about 6 months before my last deployment. I clocked him the moment he waved too long at Tessa from his balcony. The way she smiled back should have told me more than it did. Then came the little changes. She put a lock on her phone. Told me our shared passwords were outdated. Calls that used to be on speaker were suddenly held tight to her chest. She started working out more, said she needed the endorphins. Her hands, once instinctively reaching for mine, found the edge of the couch instead. Cold. Distant. Strategic. What she didn't know, what she underestimated, was that I'd been trained to notice the shift in patterns. That I could spot ambushes in silence. That I was built not just to endure but to adapt. So while she was busy slipping away into flirtations and half-lies, I made my own preparations. I rerouted part of my military pay into a private savings account under a different name, Raymond Alami. Alami was my grandfather's name, and it felt right. Like calling on blood memory. I didn't touch the funds, just watched them grow in silence. I didn't want her to feel the sting, not yet. I wanted her to feel comfortable, confident, untouchable. I also rented a small storage unit in Spokane. Locked it up with everything she never cared enough to ask about. Originals of my service records, discharge documents, the title to the house. She always thought I put her name on it. I never did. We talked about it, sure. She called it romantic when I said, "What's mine is yours." But paperwork doesn't run on promises, and I kept that deed in my name for one reason, protection. I took pictures of our belongings. Every valuable item. Serial numbers. Proof of purchase. Backed up all our family photos to a private cloud. Not because I planned to run, but because I sensed she was already halfway gone. I wasn't trying to trap her. I just refused to be left empty-handed. She thought PTSD made me weak. She forgot I've led men through fields where death was the only predictable outcome. That I've dragged bodies out of burning vehicles. That I've stared down the barrel of a gun with nothing but instinct and stubbornness to keep me breathing. My trauma wasn't weakness, it was memory. And memory, when used right, is power. The funny thing is, she kept playing the role. Sent care packages. Signed cards with hearts. Miss you, baby. I knew she was lying, but I accepted every box with gratitude. Let her think the illusion was working. Let her feel like she had me fooled. That's how you win wars. You let the enemy underestimate you. Let them believe the noise they've built will keep you from hearing the truth. When she hugged me goodbye before deployment, she held on just a second too long. Almost like guilt was clinging to my uniform. I kissed her cheek, inhaled the scent of the woman I used to love, and said, "I'll be back before you know it." She smiled, then said something she never had before, "Take your time." I knew then. Knew this wasn't just about drifting apart. It was about clearing the way for someone new. Someone who didn't wake up sweating and whispering names of the dead. Someone uncomplicated. She saw damage. I saw a strategy forming. You don't make a move until the enemy shows their hand. And Tessa? She was dealing her cards in plain sight. 2 weeks after the message that split my life in half, I was back in rhythm. Morning drills. Weapons checks. Tactical reviews. On the surface, I was as composed as ever. But every routine, every nod, every breath I took was filtering through a new lens. One where trust was dead and clarity had replaced emotion. I had work to do. Not just on the battlefield, but off it, too. It was late when it happened. I had just returned from an 8-mile night march. My back ached, shoulders tense beneath the armor, sweat burning my eyes. I collapsed onto my cot, fingers too sore to even untie my boots, when the satellite phone buzzed. The screen lit up with a flurry of alerts. My private banking app, the one Tessa didn't know about. Withdrawal attempts. Transfers. Error codes. Finally, confirmation. $91,000. Gone. I didn't blink. I just stared, heart steady like I was watching a storm from a distance. She didn't know I had eyes on that account. She thought she'd cleaned me out completely. She must have dug into the military pay I hadn't rerouted in time, pay still being deposited into the joint account. That number wasn't just a figure. It was a scream in digits. She wanted to make sure I had nothing to come back to. I didn't tell anyone. Not Trey, my bunkmate, who joked about poker night and asked if I wanted in. Not Captain Hollis, who kept eyeing me like he could see I was running on something darker than fatigue. I gave no one the satisfaction of guessing what I carried. I nodded, said I was fine, drank my water, slept like a corpse. But that night, when the tents quieted and the air settled, I got to work. My laptop connected to the camp's secured Wi-Fi. The feed buffered slowly, but it came through my home security system. I'd installed the cameras a year ago. Tessa never liked them. Said they made the house feel cold, impersonal. Now I knew why. The first clip loaded, a view from the kitchen. And there he was, Logan, in my home, wearing my gray hoodie. The one Tessa always stole from my closet when she wanted to feel wrapped in me. He was barefoot, casually flipping through the mail like he belonged. I watched as Jasper, my dog, padded into view. Logan knelt down, patted his head, gave him a treat. Jasper wagged his tail like this was normal, like it had been happening for weeks. Then came Tessa. She floated into the frame like a ghost in her own skin. Comfortable, casual. She kissed Logan on the cheek, laughed at something he said, then grabbed 2 beers from the fridge, the same fridge I built shelves into when she said she needed more space. I leaned forward, watching them move through the house like it had always been theirs. The rage didn't come. Not yet. What I felt was more surgical. Like something inside me was flipping through a mental file cabinet, recording every move, every timestamp, every face. That was when I knew it wasn't just betrayal. It was theft. That house was mine, paid for by sweat, silence, and survival. The bank statement she'd forged, the joint account she drained, the documents she probably didn't realize I'd kept in a separate location, they were all pieces of a larger puzzle. And Logan? He wasn't just the rebound. He was an accomplice. A co-conspirator with a smirk and a gym bag. I closed the feed. My reflection stared back at me in the laptop's black screen. Calm. Focused. Then I opened a new browser window and typed the name, Victor Linwood. Victor wasn't just any attorney. He was a former infantry officer turned legal pit bull. We met briefly after a training seminar on post-deployment estate management. He'd handed me a card and said, "If the war ever follows you home, call me." I did. Subject line, legal help, quiet, urgent. I attached a screenshot of the bank activity, a still frame from the security footage of Logan in my house, and a copy of the joint account closure confirmation. I expected a delay. It was late, and I didn't even know if Victor still used the same email. But 43 minutes later, a reply arrived. "I've been waiting for this day. Let's take everything back." The next morning, I requested leave under mental health stabilization. It was a clause in our deployment contract. No questions asked, no formal inquiry, just time off the front lines for readjustment. Captain Hollis approved it without hesitation. I think he'd seen the storm brewing behind my eyes and was relieved I had the sense to ask for space before something snapped. 2 weeks later, I boarded AC, 1:30 out of the base, duffel in hand, mind ablaze. No one waved me off. No grand goodbyes. Just the sand, the sky, and the next phase of the war, one I hadn't signed up for, but was ready to finish. Because now, I wasn't just coming home. I was coming for what was mine. The plane landed in Washington under a dull gray sky, the kind that made the air feel heavier than it should. I didn't text anyone, didn't call. I didn't even change into civilian clothes. I walked off that base in my uniform, boots still dusted in sand, wearing silence like armor. The rental car waited exactly where I arranged it, an unmarked gray sedan under a streetlight that flickered like it had a secret. I threw my bag in the trunk and drove. No music, no podcasts, just the low hum of tires on wet pavement and the kind of thoughts that crawl when you finally have time to hear yourself think. I checked into a motel 2 towns over under the name Alex Rollins. Cheap, clean, cash only. I didn't want to be found, not until I was ready. The manager handed me a brass key and didn't look twice at the military ID I showed out of habit. Room 208 had a window that stuck halfway open and a bed that smelled like old soap and newer regrets. I dropped my bag, locked the door, and sat on the edge of the mattress, staring at nothing. I didn't come back for a confrontation. I came to reclaim. That night, Victor met me in a diner just outside Spokane. He was older than I remembered, lines around his eyes deeper, hair grayer, suit tighter across a thicker gut. But the eyes? Still sharp, still military. He slid a folder across the table, steaming coffee between us. "Everything you asked for," he said, "and a few things you didn't." I opened it. Bank statements. Tessa's forged refinance application, complete with a signature that looked like it had been copied from a birthday card. Property listings under her name, but pushed through by someone named Dane Keller. There were emails, texts, voicemails, screenshots of digital footprints she probably thought had been erased. I flipped through the pages slowly, then stopped. "Who's Keller?" I asked. Victor sipped his coffee. "Real estate agent. Licensed. Sleazy. He's been working deals for over a decade, mostly cash transactions. But here's where it gets interesting." He pulled another sheet from his briefcase. 3 homes in the last 2 years. All owned by deployed military personnel. All sold at significantly under market value. And all tied back to him. My jaw clenched. "And Logan?" I asked. Victor nodded. "Your boy toy's been busy. 2 LLCs under his name. Both recently dissolved. One had Keller as a silent partner. And your wife? She's listed as an administrative assistant on some paperwork. Probably thought it was harmless. Helping with the business, she'd say." I closed the folder. My hands didn't shake. I wasn't angry. Not in the way most people define it. I felt something colder. Cleaner. Like steel sliding into place. "She thought I wouldn't notice," I muttered. Victor leaned forward. "She thought you'd come home too broken to fight back. Thought the silence meant surrender." She wasn't wrong about the silence. But she'd made a fatal mistake about its purpose. I wasn't silent because I was scared. I was silent because I was calculating. "She refinanced the house," I said. "Used that money to disappear me." Victor nodded. "And Logan co-signed the documents. Fraudulent, obviously, but we have to tread carefully. We're playing chess, not checkers." My eyes met his. "Then let's make the next move." The following morning, I drove by my old house. Slowly, carefully. I didn't get out. Just circled the block once. Twice. The lights were on. My dog, Jasper, lay on the porch like he owned it. And there they were, Tessa and Logan, standing in the doorway laughing about something I couldn't hear. She leaned into him like that spot had always belonged to him. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel and looked away. I wasn't going to storm inside. Wasn't going to yell. That would give them power. Make it a story they could spin, the angry vet who came back unhinged. No, that wasn't my route. Instead, I went to the storage unit. My backup life was right where I left it. Original deed. Insurance documents. My private account statements. Even the thumb drive with our wedding video, though I didn't know why I still had it. I opened the locker door, breathed in the scent of cold metal and dust, and smiled. She thought I was erased. But I had preserved every receipt of who I was and what I'd built without her. On the way back to the motel, I stopped by a small strip office. Victor was waiting inside. He handed me a burner phone and a flash drive. "This," he said, tapping the drive, "contains everything we need. Emails between Logan and Keller. Text from Tessa to the realtor. The house's security footage. And, most importantly, the refinance application with the mismatched signature. You ready to burn this whole thing down?" I pocketed the flash drive. Looked him square in the eye. "No, I'm ready to reclaim it. Because this wasn't just betrayal. It was an attempted erasure. And I was back. Uninvited, unannounced, and unbreakable. The name Dane Keller kept echoing in my mind like a bad frequency I couldn't tune out. Victor had given me the summary, but it wasn't enough. I needed the details. I needed the truth, not just to build a case, but to understand what kind of game Tessa had been playing behind my back. Because this wasn't just about betrayal. It was business. Cold. Calculated. Profitable. Victor pulled up Keller's public real estate profile. His photo looked like every other polished shark, grinning teeth, expensive suit, and a sparkle in his eyes that came from other people's losses. His license was clean, but the patterns weren't. Cash deals. Quick flips. All military-owned properties. All sold right after the owners deployed. Most of them under VA loan programs. Low equity, government-backed, perfect for exploitation. The deeper we dug, the darker it got. One house belonged to a Navy lieutenant deployed to Djibouti. Sold while he was gone. He came back to find it gutted. New owners, no recourse. Another belonged to a widow whose husband died in Iraq. Keller had her sign a relocation package that turned out to be a thinly veiled purchase agreement. She never even saw a dime. And then there were the LLCs. 3 shell companies, all tied to Logan or Keller in some indirect way. One of them, West Pine Equity Ventures, had processed the sale of a home in Bellevue. Victor found Tessa's name on an internal memo from that file, listed as interior staging consultant. Fancy way to say she picked out throw pillows and collected a cut. Tessa wasn't just complicit. She was involved. Whether she knew the full scale of it or not didn't matter anymore. She signed the papers, showed the house, hosted the open house while I was in the middle of a desert learning how to clear alleyways and stack doors. She'd turned my absence into opportunity, my silence into profit. That was the moment something in me shifted again. I'd been holding back, telling myself this wasn't personal, that justice could be clean, clinical. But that folder made it real. I wasn't a footnote in her mistakes. I was a target in her plan. I filed a report that afternoon. Quietly, thoroughly. Spokane PD had a division for real estate fraud. The officer I spoke to was polite, skeptical at first, until I gave him the security footage, bank records, and forged documents. When I mentioned Keller's name, he raised an eyebrow. "You're not the first complaint we've had," he said. "But you're the first with evidence that connects all the dots. Good. Let me be the first crack in their damn wall." I took it a step further. Froze the refinance funds. The moment I walked into the bank and showed them the forged signature compared to my legal ID and military paperwork, the manager's tone changed. They escalated it to legal review immediately. Within an hour, the transaction was flagged and suspended. Keller's money trail stopped cold. I walked out of the bank and sat in my car for a while, watching people go about their day, mothers pushing strollers, kids with ice cream, couples holding hands. All of them oblivious to the fact that just 2 blocks away, I'd pulled the emergency brake on a scheme that had been running on autopilot for who knows how long. But I wasn't done. That night, I logged into the house security system again. I hadn't disabled it, not yet. I wanted to see who walked in and out, what they said when they thought no one was listening. At 6:23 p.m., Logan entered through the garage. He was with someone, a couple in their 40s. He opened the fridge, poured them all glasses of wine from a bottle I recognized. My bottle. One I'd been saving for our 15th anniversary. The label hadn't even been cracked before deployment. "Built in 2011, Logan said casually, gesturing toward the living room. "Owner's overseas, so we're pushing for a fast sale. Cash preferred." I muted the sound and just watched. Watched him point out the hardwood floors I laid myself. The breakfast nook I built by hand after Tessa complained we didn't have a cozy corner. The framed photos still on the wall, me, Tessa, Jasper, like some macabre museum exhibit of a life they were dissecting for commission. When the couple left, Logan walked over to the couch and flopped down, pulled out his phone. A moment later, Tessa appeared. She was barefoot, comfortable. She kissed him, then sat beside him and laughed at something he showed her on his screen. They looked like a couple playing house in someone else's skin. My skin. I recorded the footage, saved it in 3 encrypted backups, then emailed it to Victor and attached it to the police report. I didn't need a confrontation. I needed exposure. This wasn't revenge. I wasn't after some melodramatic blow-up in the driveway. I wanted sunlight, public record, accountability, the kind of truth that leaves scars and court dates. Because while they played games in my living room, I was setting traps in silence. And now, the walls were closing in. It was a Tuesday when the perfect opportunity landed in my lap. Tessa reached out, casual like old times, as if she hadn't detonated our marriage through a text while I was 7,000 miles away. No apology. No explanation. Just, "Can we meet and talk?" Like adults. Riverfront Park, 3 p.m. Like adults. The nerve of her. Victor and I met early that morning, huddled in his office, both of us watching the footage from the past week on a split screen. Logan giving house tours, Keller showing up in a flashy black Audi, Tessa making lattes for strangers like they were hosting an open house party in my bones. "This is it," Victor said, tapping the screen. "If we catch Keller and Logan at the house again today, together, on camera, we've got enough to loop in the feds." He was right. Our earlier report with local authorities had triggered something bigger. Agent Riley Moreno from the FBI's Financial Crimes Division had taken an interest. Military home scams were already on their radar. They just hadn't connected all the players. Until now. I let the meeting with Tessa play out. I told her I'd be there. She responded with a thumbs-up emoji. Like we were coordinating brunch instead of facing the reckoning she didn't see coming. At 2:40 p.m., Victor and I parked a block away from the house. He handed me a spare FBI-installed receiver, tuned into the body cams from the agents waiting to pounce. I didn't blink. I didn't breathe heavy. I just sat in the passenger seat and stared at the front door of the house I built, waiting for ghosts to come to life. At 2:51 p.m., a silver sedan rolled up the driveway. Dane Keller stepped out wearing a blazer too tight across the chest and a fake smile that didn't reach his eyes. Logan followed a moment later from the side gate, key in hand. My key. They greeted each other like old friends. No caution. No hesitation. They were too used to getting away with this. They believed in their system. I watched them walk inside. Watched Logan grab my dog by the collar, leash him up like Jasper had always been his. Watched Keller take photos of the living room, murmuring about natural light and modern finishes. The receivers crackled as two more voices came online. Agents Moreno and Chong, FBI. They were parked nearby, waiting for my word. You ready? Moreno asked. Victor looked at me. I nodded. Now. Within minutes, two unmarked black Suburbans slid into place at both ends of the street. Doors flung open. Moreno led the charge up the driveway while Keller stood mid-pose in the living room, pointing toward the kitchen island like he was on an episode of a renovation show. FBI. Drop everything. Hands where we can see them. Logan's face drained of color. He stammered something. Keller tried to act confused. But the agents were already producing photos, documents, security footage, layered proof of fraud, forgery, wire transfers, and falsified applications. I stayed back. Watched from the car. I didn't want to be seen yet. Not by them. Victor's phone buzzed. Tessa's pulling into the park now, he said, glancing at the GPS tracker we'd quietly attached to her car the day before. Let's go, I said. We left the scene on Cedar Lane behind, agents corralling suspects, neighbors peeking through curtains, sirens still off. No theatrics. Just execution. Riverfront Park was quiet when we arrived. The kind of calm that made Betrayal feel like just another gust of wind. Tessa stood under the footbridge near the koi pond, dressed in a green jacket I bought her 2 Christmases ago. She kept checking her phone, pacing, looking around. I watched her for a while before approaching. Not because I needed answers, but because I wanted to see the face of someone who thought they could set fire to everything and still walk away clean. She turned when she saw me, forced a smile. Hey, she said, voice soft. Thanks for coming. I didn't return the smile. Where's Logan? I asked, straight-faced. She blinked. He's busy. Why? I nodded. Busy getting arrested. The blood drained from her face so fast, I saw her knees buckle slightly. Her lips parted, but nothing came out. What? She finally whispered. You should probably check your phone, I said. She fumbled for it, unlocked the screen, and the messages lit up one after another, calls from Logan, missed alerts from home security, a news ping that must have hit the wire faster than I expected. She looked up at me, tears forming, but I wasn't moved. You think this was just about you cheating? I asked. You think that text, I'm leaving, you're broken, that it would end with silence? I didn't, Logan said. He told me you wouldn't fight, that you'd just disappear. I stepped closer, my voice low and razor sharp. Logan doesn't know me, and neither do you. She stared at me like she was seeing me for the first time. Not as a husband, not as a victim, but as the shadow she tried to erase and now couldn't outrun. I didn't mean for it to go this far, she whispered. I didn't respond, just turned and walked away, because it wasn't her words I needed. It was the justice already in motion behind me. I watched it all unfold from a safe distance. Behind tinted glass, parked across the street like a forgotten thought, I sat as the world I once built collapsed, brick by brick, box by box. Black Suburbans flanked the driveway. Agents in Navy windbreakers streamed into my home, shouting commands that shattered the quiet suburban illusion. Logan was the first to be dragged out, shirt wrinkled, hair disheveled, and hands zip-tied behind his back. He still had the audacity to look confused, like this wasn't the day his luck ran out. Keller came next, phone still in hand, arguing with someone on the other end until an agent snatched it from him mid-sentence. He wore loafers without socks, because of course he did. The type of man who sold lies in cashmere and expected the world to applaud. Tessa arrived last. The timing was almost poetic. She pulled into the driveway, music still playing from the speakers, sipping a smoothie with her sunglasses pushed up into her hair. She stepped out of the car and froze. I saw her blink. Once. Twice. Her brain scrambling to reconcile the image in front of her. "Logan," she called out, voice trembling. Logan didn't answer. He was too busy being stuffed into the back of a federal vehicle. Keller shouted something about lawyers and slander and unlawful detainment. Tessa turned toward the front door, confused, like maybe this was a bad dream or a prank with cruel timing. But then Agent Moreno approached her with a file in hand and said 3 words I don't think she ever expected to hear. "We need to talk." I didn't move, didn't flinch, just watched. She pulled out her phone and dialed my number. I didn't answer. A moment later, a message came through. "Tessa, what's happening? What did you do?" I stared at the words, thought about the irony. All that time she spent moving behind my back, convinced I was too distant, too damaged to react, too broken to care. And now here she was, caught in a trap I didn't build out of anger, but precision. I didn't reply. Not then. Not yet. Victor called. "We've got confirmation. The FBI is expanding the investigation." Logan and Keller were part of a multi-state scam targeting deployed military families. They've already linked at least 5 other homes to forge documents. "And Tessa?" I asked. "She's a wild card. Not technically charged yet, but they're going to dig deep. The digital footprint is bad." "You okay?" I glanced back at the house. Jasper was barking from the porch, confused by the strangers with badges. My gut twisted for a moment, not for Tessa, not for Logan, not even for what was lost, but for that dog. Loyal, innocent, still waiting for me to walk through the door like nothing changed. "I'm fine," I said. "I just want my dog." Victor chuckled softly, voice steady. "You'll get him." Later that evening, I stood outside the station while Agent Moreno debriefed me. The sky was turning dark, the orange hue of sunset bleeding into asphalt and streetlights. We went over timelines, statements, next steps. He asked if I wanted to file a formal victim impact report. I told him no. "This isn't about me being a victim," I said. "It's about not letting this happen to anyone else." He nodded, handed me a folder. "We'll keep you updated. We've seized the accounts connected to Logan and Keller. Tessa's financials are being reviewed now. If it turns out she benefited from the fraud, there could be more charges." I opened the folder, photos, transaction records, even a copy of the fake refinance application with her fake signature. I stared at it, letting the weight of it all settle. "Thank you," I said, quietly. He extended his hand. "No, thank you. You did what most wouldn't." I walked away with that folder tucked under my arm, a strange peace settling over me like armor. I didn't go back to the motel that night. I drove to the cabin instead, the one I had purchased years ago but never told Tessa about. 10 acres of untouched forest land in Montana, a wood-framed cabin with a tin roof and a view that made the sky feel endless. I pulled up just after midnight. The air was crisp. Still, the stars above so clear it felt like they were painted there for me. Jasper was already inside. Victor had picked him up earlier and made sure he was safe. He ran to me the second I opened the door, tail wagging, eyes bright. No judgment, no questions, just trust. I dropped to my knees and buried my face into his fur. "I'm here," I whispered. "I'm finally home." He licked my cheek and leaned into me like he'd been holding this moment just as tightly as I had. I stood up, walked to the table, and set down the FBI folder. For a long time, I just stared at it. Then I took out the final photo, the one of Logan smiling with his arm around Tessa in my kitchen, and I lit a match. Let it burn. Let the past turn to ash while I built something real. Because today wasn't about revenge. It was about restoration. The choice wasn't supposed to feel this clean. I sat in Victor's office 3 days after the arrests, the morning light cutting through his blinds in perfect slices. On the table between us sat a thick manila envelope. Inside, legal documents, a notarized confession, and a divorce settlement so stripped of emotion it could have belonged to strangers. I hadn't touched it yet, just stared. Because as much as I had prepared for this moment, nothing could quite brace me for the reality of watching 13 years reduced to bullet points and signatures. Victor leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "She's agreed to everything." I raised an eyebrow. "She signed a full confession," he continued. "Admitted to co-participation in the refinance fraud, acknowledged knowing Logan's past business ventures were shady, and forfeited her claim to the house, joint assets, and future alimony. All we need now is your decision." The words hit me with the force of silence. They weren't loud. They didn't echo. But they shifted the air in the room like the moment before a breach, when everything holds still before everything changes. I picked up the folder, opened it, and skimmed the pages. Her handwriting was there, still neat, still steady, as if what she was admitting to was no heavier than a grocery list. She had, in one line, admitted to helping remove my name from the property deed using a forged signature, then another acknowledging she knew Logan was pocketing profits from the sale of homes while the rightful owners were still overseas. And finally, one sentence that stood apart from the rest. I understand and accept that I will no longer have any legal or financial claim to Marcus or his estate. Victor cleared his throat. She was given two options: face formal charges or sign and surrender. She chose the latter. You still have the right to pursue charges, Marcus. But it's your call. I stared at the last page, the final signature line where her name sat next to a date and the bold black stamp of a court notary. I thought I'd feel something triumphant. I didn't. I just felt done. Victor leaned forward. So, what do you want? I turned to him slowly, voice low, deliberate. I want her to know this isn't what she broke. It's what she built. He studied me, the corner of his mouth twitching with something close to pride. Then we filed this today, he said. I nodded. He made the call to his paralegal, and just like that, the divorce was submitted to the courts, clean, uncontested, and irreversible. No drawn-out depositions. No character assassinations. Just a signature, a confession, and the sound of a door shutting with finality. I walked out of Victor's office into a world that looked the same but felt completely different. The sky was still gray. The city still noisy. But inside me, something had unlatched. A weight I didn't know I was carrying had finally slipped off. There was nothing left tying me to Tessa. No bank account. No property. No promises. I was free. She didn't flinch. You've made your point, Julian. You proved you're not the pushover. You showed your teeth. But don't pretend you don't care how messy this gets. You've always hated public drama. You're right, I said, standing. I hate drama. That's why I built my case privately. Why I didn't go to the media. Why I gave your family the courtesy of being exposed behind closed doors instead of a courtroom. I walked around the desk, took the folder from her hand, and tossed it into the bin without opening it. You can't seriously think this is over, she said, rising. You think because you have some documents and a few signatures, you're clean? I looked her in the eye. I don't need to be clean. I need to be done. And I am. She stepped closer, voice softer now. We can fix this, Julian. Maybe not everything, but something. We were good once. No, I said. We were polished once. There's a difference. Her lip quivered. For a second, just a flash, I saw the woman I married. The one who used to laugh at my stupid impressions and dance barefoot in the kitchen. But she was gone. Replaced by someone who saw love as leverage and loyalty as currency. You betrayed us, she said, voice shaking. You humiliated my family. You went nuclear. No, I said calmly. I finally chose myself. She turned her back to me, arms crossed. They were just trying to protect me. Secure our future. By stealing mine? I stepped closer, my tone level. By gaslighting me into signing my name off everything my grandfather built? She spun around. You think you're some kind of hero now? You think this all makes you noble? I shrugged. Not noble. Just finished. She stared at me, searching for an opening, a crack, anything she could slip through. But there was nothing left. Fine, she said finally, grabbing her bag. Keep the company. Keep your precious legacy. But you'll regret this. Family is everything, Julian. Even if they're messy. Even if they screw up. At the end of the day, blood is blood. I walked her to the door, holding it open. Then maybe you shouldn't have tried to sell me for it. She froze in the doorway, her eyes wide, tears threatening but refusing to fall. For a moment, I thought she might speak. Apologize. Reach for me. Instead, she squared her shoulders and walked out, heels clicking down the marble hallway like war drums retreating. I closed the door and leaned against it, letting the quiet settle. It was strange. Relief didn't feel like a fireworks show or a great unburdening. It felt like stillness. Like the sound of someone leaving and knowing you won't follow. I glanced at the bin where her proposal sat, unopened. I could still smell her perfume in the air. Sweet. Expensive. Fading. She was right about one thing. Family is everything. But trust? That's what makes a family. And that she had shattered beyond repair. The Barrett name used to feel like a shadow. Something heavy and long, stretching over every decision I made. Every room I entered. My grandfather, Henry, had built it with grit and patience, brick by brick, dollar by hard-earned dollar. For years, I felt like I was merely walking in his echo. But now, Seated behind his old mahogany desk with sunlight pouring through the bay windows of his former office, I felt it differently. It wasn't a weight anymore. It was a foundation. The leather chair creaked beneath me as I leaned back and studied the documents Myra had just placed in front of me. The final trust disbursement forms. Crisp signatures. Verified wire instructions. Asset summaries. All accounted for. Everything was where it needed to be because I had refused to be pushed aside. Myra stood across the desk, arms folded, a rare smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "He always knew you'd come through," she said. "That's why he gave you everything." I looked up at her. "Even when I didn't feel ready?" She nodded. "Especially then. Henry didn't believe in handing the crown to someone who was already shining. He believed in handing it to the one who kept showing up, even when nobody noticed." I sat with that for a moment. My grandfather had always seen me. Not the polished, performative version I'd become around Marissa's family. Not the passive listener they assumed I was. But me, the kid who spent summers organizing dusty ledgers and studying municipal codes over basketball. The man who thought legacy was something you protected, not something you flaunted. I opened the folder to the last page, scanning the line that listed the final philanthropic allocation, the Barrett Legacy Foundation, initial funding, $2,500,000. Beneath that, in italics, my mission statement, to provide grants, resources, and mentorship to young entrepreneurs from underserved communities. That had been my idea, not his, mine. And it was the first time something with the Barrett name on it had my fingerprints all over it. "Have the press releases gone out yet?" I asked. Myra nodded. "Scheduled for 10 a.m. Your speech is set for Thursday. The city mayor confirmed he'll be there. And your grandfather's portrait has been restored, framed and ready for the foundation lobby." I nodded, a quiet sense of pride stirring in my chest. Not for revenge. Not for proving anything to Marissa or her family. This was the part that mattered. The part no one had asked about during all their scheming and calculating. What I actually wanted to do with what I'd inherited. "Any updates on Randall?" I asked, sipping my coffee. She pursed her lips. Formal inquiry opened. Financial misconduct at 3 companies tied to Lorraine's charity circle. Randall's name is all over the back-end wiring. The investigators you hired had airtight documentation. It's only a matter of time. And Lewis stepped down from his board roles. Quietly. The pressure was getting too visible. And Lorraine. Myra gave a dry chuckle. "Hasn't posted in days. That's how you know she's panicking." I smirked, but only for a second. Then I glanced toward the old window, wide, arched, and just slightly warped from age. The same window I'd sat under as a teenager, watching traffic pass below while my grandfather told me stories of the deals he made, the ones he lost, and the people he regretted trusting. He used to say, "Legacy is the long game. Not what you leave behind, but what lives because of you." That sentence lived inside me now. When Myra finally left, I stood up and walked to the wall where his portrait hung. It wasn't a grand painting, just a photo. Black and white. Him in a rolled-up shirt, sleeves dirty from a construction site, his arm slung around one of the original Barrett & Sons trucks. He was smiling, not like a man with money, but like a man with purpose. I touched the frame lightly. "I did it, old man," I murmured. "They tried to twist everything, and I still held it. For you. For me." Outside the office, my assistant, Carla, knocked and peeked in. "Mr. Barrett, there's someone here to see you." Said her name is Elise Marsh? Says she's a single mother running a tech startup out of her garage. You gave her your card at a youth workshop 3 months ago. I nodded. "Send her in. And bring 2 coffees." As Carla disappeared, I took my seat again, this time with a little less weight in my shoulders. Elise walked in, nervous, hopeful. And as we shook hands and sat down to discuss what kind of help she needed, I realized something I hadn't before. This was the real inheritance. Not the numbers in the account. Not the title. But the ability to change someone's trajectory. Quietly. Without fanfare. Without cameras. By the end of that meeting, I'd approved her first grant. $5,000. Enough to stabilize her operation and get her product to market. As she left, eyes glassy with gratitude, I leaned back in the chair one more time. There were no parades. No roaring applause. But somewhere in the city, another version of me might just be getting a chance. And that was the only victory I needed. It was my birthday again. Exactly 1 year since that night, the night I stood in a living room filled with polished deception and paper-thin applause. 1 year since I toasted a room that tried to unmake me. Since I smiled through betrayal disguised as cake and champagne. A lot had changed since then. Not loudly, not explosively, quietly, intentionally. The kind of change that settles into your bones and rewrites the way you breathe. This year, there was no surprise party. No Lorraine with her icy charm. No Randall brooding in a corner. No Marissa standing at my side with a practiced smile and a hidden agenda. They were gone. All of them. Removed, replaced, erased from my daily rhythm like smudges wiped off glass. Instead, I sat in the clean, modern office of the Barrett Legacy Foundation, surrounded by white oak bookshelves and walls lined with photos of young grant recipients, kids who reminded me of myself at 19. Hungry, quiet, underestimated. They were the new circle I stood with. The people who didn't want my money, just my belief in them. And today, I was giving them more than that. I picked up the pen. Before me was a single-page document. Not a contract forged in greed. Not a trap dressed as a gift. It was a grant, official funding for a trade school scholarship in my grandfather's name. One full ride a year for a student who wanted to build something with their hands. Just like he had. Just like I was still learning to do in my own way. The weight of that signature was different. There was no pressure in my chest, no cautious scanning of the fine print, no lawyer breathing down my neck. Just me, a pen, and a mission I actually believed in. I signed it slowly, not for drama but for intention. Each letter of my name felt earned. Julian Barrett. No hyphen. No additions. No shared surname clinging like ivy to a crumbling wall. Just mine. The moment the pen left paper, Carla peeked her head into the room, grinning. "They're ready for you upstairs." I stood, smoothing my jacket. "How's the turnout?" She smiled. "Standing room only. 2 city council members. A few journalists. One kid with a camera and a YouTube channel already crying about it on Twitter." I chuckled softly. "Sounds like a party." As we stepped into the elevator, I caught my reflection in the mirrored wall. I looked solid, not flashy, not performative, just real. The kind of man my grandfather wanted me to be. The kind of man I should have fought to be sooner. The elevator opened onto the rooftop conference space. Glass walls. Soft jazz in the background. Nothing too grand, nothing too empty. Just enough. The crowd clapped politely as I stepped up to the podium. Elise Marsh, the single mother I'd helped months ago, stood off to the side with her son. She gave me a small nod. I returned it. That nod meant more to me than all of Lorraine's staged applause combined. I cleared my throat, glanced down at my notes, then folded them and set them aside. "I had a different kind of birthday last year," I said. There were lights, smiles, gifts, but it wasn't a celebration. It was a wake-up call. A reminder that not everyone in your circle is in your corner. The room stilled. The kind of silence that means people are really listening. Legacy, to me, used to mean inheritance, wealth, status. But my grandfather taught me otherwise. He said legacy is about what lives on, not in bank accounts or buildings, but in people, in opportunity, in choices. I paused. I was finding a young man in the front row with oil-stained fingers and a trade school logo on his hoodie. He looked stunned to be there, like someone had called his name in a language he hadn't heard in years. "This scholarship is just the beginning," I continued. "It's our way of saying, we see you. We believe in the ones who don't always get invited to the table. And if there's no table, we'll build one together." A soft swell of applause rose, warm and unscripted. I stepped down from the podium and walked through the crowd, shaking hands, exchanging hugs, pausing for photos I didn't mind being in. Not because I needed to be seen, but because the people beside me deserved to be. At the back of the room, Myra stood with a glass of champagne. "Your grandfather would have hated this music," she said with a smirk. I laughed. "He would have pulled the speaker wires by now." She raised her glass. "To legacies." I raised mine. "To beginnings." Later, as the sun dipped below the skyline, casting golden light across the rooftop, I stood alone for a moment. Just breathing. No noise. No false faces. No strings pulling at my choices. They had planned a party to steal my future. But I built something better instead. Sometimes revenge isn't loud. It doesn't scream or burn bridges in public. Sometimes it's a single signature. A locked vault. A room full of new faces who know your name because you gave them a chance, not because you demanded respect, but because you gave it first. They thought they'd broken me, but I walked away owning every piece they tried to take.